not, do we have projections on how that would change our numbers?
I don't know if that first thing is true, but that's an interesting question. It's worth looking at.
And then compass.org says it's true. That's where they get the statistics. But I'm waiting to find out.
Yeah, I know.
Whatever.
Yep.
And we do know what our peak flows are in the summertime, not when you have a big rain event, we have a lot of inflow issues,
Yeah.
but we know what our peak flows are in the summertime, so that kind of is probably our best indicator of where we are, kind of our maximum usage.
Hal's not coming.
Okay,
He
and
can't
then
make
Michael, I don't,
Expect him.
yeah, I would expect him to, but
Yeah.
It is 4 o'clock, and we will call the meeting to order of the Grand Marais Planning Commission, June 5th, 2019. The records show that Hal Greenwood and Mike Gary are not present at this time. We have an agenda. Are there any additions or changes to that agenda? If not, we get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
I'll move that.
Motion has been made.
I'll second.
Michael, thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adopting the agenda as presented, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We have minutes from our previous meeting. Corrections, changes, comments?
Not from me?
I'll move we accept the minutes.
Motion has been made, and
I will
motion
second.
made and seconded to approve the minutes of the May 1st Planning Commission meeting. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. First item on our agenda is a public hearing for a variance. Mike Senty is requesting a variance from the public street access requirement to divide an existing 100-foot by 770-foot lot located in the R1 Permanent Residence Zone District into 3 lots. 2 of the proposed lots would be accessed via driveway and utility easement. You don't have a map
No.
on your
Can you explain
present,
what that means?
present.
You could grab
Should've said it,
the Eagle View.
Yeah, it would be, I think it would be helpful if we had the
Yeah.
map up on the screen so that people can understand it. You know, I mean, even it wasn't in our packet.
It's not in the packet, yeah,
but-
that's what's,
But,
I'm confused by.
but it was sent out,
Yes.
so we.
I didn't see a map in my information either.
There's that one.
I looked it up.
I looked it up too,
Oh, you know what?
but I,
Maybe,
well.
maybe because I received the notice because I was, as a nearby landowner, that's where I saw the map, so I saw the map.
It wasn't in my
Okay,
email.
I saw the map, and that, so I was familiar with it, so.
Sign in there, buddy.
Sorry.
I don't have my,
You can do City Hall at Boreal. My super secret password.
slow down.
Up. Wrong line.
You'll never figure it out now.
You got the mouse.
Yeah. Click on the Connect Explorer. I gotta put the password back in. Well, this is fun. Anybody got any jokes?
How does the tiger buy beer? With a growler.
Nice, mm-hmm.
I can think of my, what do you call an alligator in a life vest? An investigator.
Yeah. Nice.
Do the county's mapping application, actually.
Well, at any rate, you know, this is a request to take this, you know, 100-foot wide parcel that fronts on County Road 7 or 5th Street, all the way up to the back of that.
Yeah, can you talk a little louder?
I can.
Okay. So the idea is to take this 100-foot lot, 100-foot wide lot, and create 3 parcels out of it. And their city requirement requires that all lots have public street access to them. And Mike Senty is requesting a variance from that requirement in order to subdivide this property into 3 parcels, one which would front on Fifth Street, the other 2, and I believe it would, one would access a driveway off of Fifth Street, and the other would come in from the back, or they all come off?
All three off the driveway.
The driveway,
Although
okay.
the plan is to build the driveway just for the first southern one and then middle one. But
And then a few,
Say that again.
there's 3 parcels there stacked up one above each other.
Yep.
The northern parcel.
Okay,
Mike, could you come up to the,
Sure. The northernmost parcel is adjacent
Okay, I'm
to
not
our
in-
current residence.
I can't scroll in that
So,
effectively.
although it's adjacent to it, we are unable to access it directly because of the geothermal system. You know, we can't just drive over that sort of stuff. So we want to maintain the possibility of accessing all 3 off of this driveway.
right there.
Yeah,
That's good.
That's what we want to do.
All right, so this is the lot in question. Can people see my cursor?
I think we need to scroll up a little bit so we can see kind of the existing roads that are already up there. Other way.
There's no roads up here.
No, of that.
The other side, the other
There's
way.
Senty Road.
Senty Road is here.
Okay.
So how are you?
Senty Road is not going to access this property. There's going to be, this is the 770-foot dimension. That lot has public street access down here on the south line.
So where's
The
road?
proposal will be to divide it into a top, middle, and bottom section. The top section is going to be attached up here to this lot, which has access to Senty Road, although potentially, you know, it wouldn't have to be in the future. This middle one is landlocked and has no street access. The variance is saying that we will allow a private driveway and utility easement to cross the lower lot and serve the middle lot.
And also serve the upper lot as an
So all
option.
3.
Yeah.
Can you show me where the road will go?
Along the east, the proposal is along the east side of that
You wanna-
parcel.
I want to know how, it's directly across from my driveway, directly.
Yeah, That's,
here's the,
This picture, I mean, what that tells me is that I'm going to have a dirt road that's going to look right at all my picture windows, right there.
well, I
I'm
mean,
gonna
we're,
have-
yeah, well, you'll have your opportunity to you know,
Okay.
speak your, but we just want to lay out the facts here and make sure everybody understood what it is that is being proposed, so that everybody's got the same information, just because since we don't have the map in front of us. So the parcel will be split in roughly into 3 equal
Somewhat equal.
size parcels.
I think it's 200 feet, 300 feet, and then 200 and something. I could tell you right now quickly. 200 feet, 300 feet, and then 270 feet.
Okay. And so the driveway that would access those parcels would come along the east side of that property. And do you have a defined easement,
Yeah.
easement width?
Yes.
And what is that? That's not included in a report.
No, there's a 20-foot easement that's on there.
A 20-foot wide easement along that east side that would
Correct.
access
Copies on the way.
through the first parcel into the second parcel, and does that easement continue on into the third parcel?
It continues through the second parcel.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So does everybody understand that now? I mean, just to make sure.
So it would be on my side of the property? 'Cause I can't-
Yes, Cindy, it's on your side, your side of the I mean, it's on Mike's property, but on your side of that lot.
So that 20-foot easement is on the right-hand side of
Right-hand
that
side,
line.
Yes.
right there. Where we go.
Right
So
here.
it isn't included by the 100 feet wide for each lot. It's 120 if you include the road, correct?
No, it's 100.
No, it's 100.
So
He's got a
part of that
100-foot
20
lot, it's 100 foot across,
I understand that.
and then he's got a 20-foot easement that will run all the way up to where it would access that third parcel. That's what he's asking for, so. Okay. So, so, yeah, I mean, it looks like your driveway's right here. Looks like where the curb cut is right here, so. So there's the road would be right along that, so.
And the headlights and so.
Yep.
All of it.
Yep. Okay, but so everybody understands, that's what's being requested. So, Mike, do you have anything to add to that, or?
You know, I think everything is in this information here and, you know, in the plat map.
I'm not sure why that's not in this package.
Yeah, we don't have the application or the map in our
Oh, you don't have
packet.
this either?
No, we don't have that information in front of us, but.
Should I read it to you, or?
Yeah, if you want to add anything to the record, yeah, I think it'd be important for you to make any statements that you want at this point.
Because I mostly responded to the various different components of the request, you know, that's part of the application for a variance, and there's 5 different components. So I'll just read each one of them. The first component is facts showing the variance is in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance, okay? So our request is in harmony with the ordinance. We are requesting a variance to construct a driveway and utility services to lots on the attached survey, which would be this right here. Driveway is to access the middle lot. We want to keep the option open to extend the driveway to access the upper lot adjacent to the Senty residence. Second part of this same component, our intent is to develop the middle and lower lots for residential development and build a driveway and utility services to serve these 2 lots. The upper lot is adjacent to the current Senty residence. We wish to retain the option to access this lot should we decide to build a garage or storage building on this part of the property. Access to this property, Senty property, is not possible over the current home sites occupied by Sentys. The buried geothermal field prevents access to this property via Senty Road. Okay. Number 2, second component. The facts showing the variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan. We believe our request to develop 2 lots that will be available for residential development fits well within the City of Grand Marais comprehensive plan, particularly within the land use section. These lots can then be used for low-income, senior, or market-rate housing for young families. We can see no adverse impact on the city with the addition of these lots. The third component for the variance, it is facts showing the proposal seeks to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance, the answer is, the zoning ordinance addresses access to a subdivision, but not for dividing an existing property that does not meet subdivision rules. That's the reason for the variance. In essence, it's not addressed by the ordinance. Number 4, facts showing the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property and not created by the landowner. Answer, unfortunately, due to the depth and width of the property, a subdivision is not applicable. There are neighbors on both sides of the property, so growth is not possible. Then the 5th component, number 5. Facts showing the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. And my response is, please see the attached schematic, which would be this right here. The proposed lots are within the size range of lots in the area. The area is residential, and these new lots will be for residential development. I do want to add one other thing, too. I know the city is encouraging development of existing lots versus, creating new lots, infilling existing lots for residential use, so I think that's another component of our request.
Okay, commissioners have any other questions of Mr. Senty?
Is there any particular reason why the road that you're proposing of the driveway would be on the east side and not the west side? Does that matter?
It's a little more open on the east side
Okay.
versus the west side has more trees, so, we're not destroying as much more permanent vegetation. There's no, and I would have to, I'm not sure how, there's a couple of low areas through there. They're not wetlands, that's been checked with the county.
Yep.
But I think it might run more parallel, but I don't remember off the top of my head here.
Okay.
Mostly it was because of the trees, is what it was. Because the east side of our lot, the east line of the lot there, and then especially on the lower lot, it's also open to the east, in addition.
Right, I can see that.
Okay. Stacy?
I have questions about the process here. So when we did the dividing for the wild or winter, whatever it was, there was a process. We said, okay, go ahead and do your plan and bring it back to us, and then we'll say yes or no to that plan. Is this kind of the same thing? You're taking a chunk and you're dividing it up?
The subdivision, it is the very similar activity, right?
Okay.
You're taking a chunk and you're dividing it up. That's controlled by our subdivision ordinance, which allows for exemptions from creating a new plat when what you're doing is creating lots that meet the minimum zoning requirements and no more than 2 in a calendar year. So subdividing off no more than 2 in a calendar year.
So these fit
That
the requirements?
Our ordinance does not require this subdivision to get a plat. I mean, the other major difference between those two conversations is there's no new public streets, no new public utilities involved in this. This will all be private, whereas that conversation was a new public street and new utilities that the public will be owning and maintaining.
And if there were homes built here, they would be on city sewer and water?
Which has to go in, right?
Yes.
So that means the road will be tore up. Is that it? Right?
Potentially, yeah. I don't know if it needs to be
Actually,
or not.
the sewer line is on the north side of the road, right at the edge of the sidewalk is where it's located.
And so the sidewalk will also be.
It's part of the, yeah,
Curb and
it's
gutter.
a certain section of,
Pay for the new curb and gutter?
that's part of our
That's
cost.
part of it?
Yeah, that's part of our
Because
cost.
we paid for that once already.
No, we get to pay for it.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's an access curb that has to be put in. I don't know what they call it.
Yeah.
Driveway apron.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. Have you noticed what happened to the one on Muir Street, at the bottom of 7th? All of the buildup of water and the sewer smell and the ice in the winter?
From the, you mean from the lot on the northwest corner
No,
there?
it's right on the sidewalk. As I walk the dog and go across there every day, that right at the end. when-
Yeah, no, I know. That's from the water coming off of that property up there, it's
Is there any-
swampy.
And so how do we know that's not gonna happen over here?
There's no groundwater moving and, there's no groundwater moving.
Yeah, I think, Sandy, I think we'll give you an opportunity to raise those questions, but I just want to make sure that we go through our process here, and then we'll give public hearing process. Anybody that wants to speak can have time to do that, so.
So how do we ensure that future development has taken into consideration any wetlands, any drainage issues? So we decide to split this. Okay, there's 3 parcels there. And then we're not saying, okay, go ahead and develop however you want? Or what's the process here?
Well, he's not requesting a land use permit to build a structure. And so those are the two opportunities when drainage issues are discussed, when we have a plat and there's a lot of new roadways and such, and then we want to approach it up front. We usually would talk about it. Or when someone applies for a land use permit, that's the issue, we'll bring that issue up. Two things to keep in mind. The city doesn't regulate wetlands at all. We've asked the county to do that on our behalf, and they do it on our behalf. So we don't have any role to play in Wetland Conservation Act enforcement. What we do is when someone comes in for a land use permit where they're going to build a house in a raw piece of land, we advise that they connect with the county and make sure that they're in compliance with it. The other thing to note is the city doesn't have a stormwater ordinance either. So we don't have a set of standards that we would require someone to meet. When we have an opportunity to look at those issues and it's an area of concern, we might add conditions to a conditional use permit, but it's not something that's based on a fixed set of rules that we've created.
How am I supposed to know there won't be stormwater issues?
You can't, it's not knowable for you.
But that would come up as soon as they, I mean, I'm thinking about previous meetings where like, we've got designed ponds or, you know, those things would have to be built in once the county did their assessment.
When the county is going to look not at stormwater for us, but just wetlands.
Okay.
And so there's a whole process where they'll determine, are there any? How many are going to be affected? Have you gone through the appropriate process to minimize that or avoid it? And then if you affect a certain amount, you may have to pay for that. Stormwater runoff, when we look at plat, for instance, and there's roads and ditches that are being designed by a civil engineer, they're going to design to a standard. We don't have a standard to give them to tell them what to design to, but they still have one that they're working on. So when you looked at the Winterstone plat and it had a pond in it, and it described how the water was going to flow. We also knew that there was water flowing on that piece of property. In a
But
situation like this,
we knew that only because that was
A subdivision. A subdivision.
that was 8 or
yep,
homes.
that's right. So because this doesn't
And because
require a
this is
plat.
only 3, we don't have that information.
No, we don't have that information. That's right.
What if you think back to when we, you know, we were dealing with the Joins property. That was not a subdivision. You know, that property's already been subdivided, split up. They were asking for a variance to create one lot that was less than the required, I think, minimum lot width or size or whatever it was. And that's the same kind of thing until they would apply for a permit to actually build a home on that property. There would be no understanding as to what the requirements would be until they you know, decided what size home, where that was going to be located, but there'd be no city involvement with that stormwater that might run off of that site. I mean, in fact, even this parcel of, you know, Mike wanted to just sell the whole parcel and somebody wanted to build on there would be no assurance that wetlands or stormwater or any of that would be done in a satisfactory way. We just don't have those regulations in the city.
Should we?
Well, I mean, that's a good question to ask, but it's, you know, at this point, we don't have that we don't have that, and so there is no requirement. I mean, there are wetland standards that if the county assists with that, would be incorporated into the development of that site, or sites, if it's multiple sites.
So just so I understand a bit more about the process, let's say Mike was selling this entire section to someone who wanted to build a house in the middle of it. And they wanted to propose putting a driveway up along one of the sides of the, you know, to the building structure. What would be the process in that?
They would get a land use permit from City Hall.
Got it?
There'd be no review by this
No,
commission.
be administrative. As long as they meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance, the permit would be granted.
Okay.
Anything else, Stacy?
I think that covers my questions.
All right. Mike, you have one more thing?
Yeah, to address the question about wetlands, I know at least the lower lot has been, Mitch Travis has gone through there and actually initially identified potential wetland areas. He was through there when the ground was still frozen, and he's been through subsequent to that, and we're fine. We don't have wetland issues.
Okay, with that, I think we're going to close it to this discussion and open it up for public hearing, any public comments. So this is opportunity to voice any concerns that you may have. So if you have questions or concerns, please step forward, identify yourself, because we're being recorded. And, well, it's it's the nature of a public meeting is that, things get recorded, so. I mean, really, don't be shy. I mean,
We'd
if you have,
love to hear from you.
If you have questions, I mean, we're not here to try to intimidate you, or we just want you to, to let us know what your thoughts are. And
Okay, well, for starters, the number 5, it says it will not alter the essential character of the locality. How can you possibly say that?
It's zoned for residential.
I'm saying, but the character of the locality was the words you used. You're going to take my whole, well, all of our trees, they'll all be, that whole area will be stripped right there. There'll be a dirt road coming onto the road. So every morning, or all through the whole day of any day, I'll have headlights coming right into my picture windows every day now, from now on. It's going to be a dirt road. I'm not going to open my windows and have the dirt blowing right into my house from the dirt road.
Well, here's the other option.
Can I ask you what's going to happen for snow plowing? Where are they going to put that snow when they come down that road across the street?
That's going to, well,
That's
it's
my
not
driveway.
on your, we wouldn't, no, it wouldn't be put on your property
But when
because.
it melts, what's going to, I have a paved driveway,
Mhm.
and it goes right downhill. So when all of that melts and they push all that snow, because I see the banks and there's no storm, the first storm drain is at her house, which is quite a ways away from there. And you see how big the banks get.
Here's the question that I really have for you. Let's say this was a, just, let's say I was,
Driveway is one thing,
No.
but three, you're gonna make it a loop, right? You'll be
no,
able to go all the way around?
no.
Just straight
It's
up
just
and
a
down.
straight,
So
straight
just-
road. Yeah,
so
it's a driveway, is all it is. It's a driveway going up there. It's not a road. It's a
How can it
driveway.
not be a road if it's gonna access 3 lots?
There's a 20-foot easement on that, 20 feet of width. It's going to be a driveway is what it is. It's not a road.
That needs to be plowed, and it's gonna be dirt.
Like any driveway, in that area. It's a driveway more narrow than what Rocky Johnson has.
Okay. So,
And
where are
there's
they
going to
gonna put the snow?
be on either side.
Oh, and then, so when, on either side across the street, or on either side like this, it's still gonna melt into my driveway, no matter what.
Well, it does anyways.
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
There's nothing there for it to come from. That is straight across. And now it'll be instead of the sidewalk being plowed by the county, they take their little thing all the way across that sidewalk and clear it every day when it snows. Now it'll be an open access like this, right? It'll be like a flute down, right?
What do you suggest?
Well, I'd like, if it's at all possible, to move it so it's not, it's directly aimed right at my driveway. If you could, can it go farther to the east at all? Even just-
It's right at the property line. The only way I'd be able to
Well,
move
maybe
east is
She
if,
mentioned she would
I
be
have a
willing to,
solution.
she would be willing to, go over into her property. Just moving it over some would at least give me the curb there instead of right directly in my sight all day, every day.
And so Sandy, just to understand, is that your concern is that driveway will impact your, use of your
Absolutely,
property?
it's going to impact. And also, what about when you're doing construction? Are you going to be using my driveway to turn around in with all the equipment going in and out of there?
of course not.
Right, okay.
Well, it's your private driveway, you know, that's not.
It is, yeah.
No, we're not planning on doing that. It's,
Yeah, and unfortunately, you're not gonna be the only one doing the work. And I mean, I'm saying I don't trust you, but I do see what happens. Because I also had a construction company for 18 years, and I know what can happen.
Mhm.
So, at any rate.
So Sandy, I mean, are your thoughts that if the driveway was in a different location, that would
Well,
have
if it
less of an
wasn't,
impact?
yeah, I mean, we're talking straight, it's right face to face.
I mean, I hear what
Right.
you're saying. I mean, I just want to make sure I
So here I come,
understand.
I'm going to go to work in the morning, and here comes a car going up to the school, and a bus coming out this way, and there's a car trying to get out of their driveway. We're going to be right there at each other's face to face.
Yeah,
it just
okay, I
seems-
mean, I just want to make sure I understand.
That's my concern, yeah. And besides the fact that, you know, that house has been our house since 1975, and it's
Yeah.
going to change the whole thing. That's my concern.
what do you
Okay.
suggest?
You want to build me a fence?
I bet you don't want to look at the fence either.
No, I don't. Exactly.
Yeah.
See, do you understand? That's
Yeah,
my
yeah.
point.
All right, well, thank you, I appreciate. Cindy, you had something you wanted to say?
I'm Cindy Larson. Sorry, my voice is, and my hearing is completely gone. My suggestion is to maybe get an easement from me to move it over a little bit. And then hopefully someday if I ever sell the property, I could use the driveway too.
I'm open to that. Yeah.
That's just
What would
a
you
suggestion.
suggest?
Huh?
What would you suggest?
Just what I said.
Yeah, I mean, where?
I've
That's-
never been to a meeting like this. I have no idea.
That's all right, yeah. Let's just talk. Would you think in terms of right here?
Yeah,
And
just
then
like
jump over?
10 feet in my property or something.
So it'd be like 10 feet on your side and 10
Or
feet on
something
our
like
side,
that,
or 20
yeah.
feet on your side?
Or I don't know.
So just so we're understanding what you're saying is that, you know, along this line here, rather than 20-foot easement here,
Mm-hmm.
a 20-foot easement on this side of the line, or?
I'd have to look at the,
I mean, obviously it doesn't impact your house. because
No, it
it's
doesn't.
Way over there.
and that would
And then
make Sandy
the question
happy.
is how far back would that easement go? I mean, would you run it back all the way on that side?
And that's fine, because I'm thinking someday of maybe selling property also.
Mm.
It would just make it easier for me, if
Sure.
I ever do.
Yeah. And we would be building a road that you could,
Right.
it wouldn't cost you anything to build the road.
To build the road.
Ah, we have ulterior
I'm
motives.
thinking. I just thought of this today.
What do you think?
It's better than
It's
what you
over
were gonna
Friday.
do. Yeah, that would help me a lot. It wouldn't be in my face anyway. That would be nice.
Yeah, I'm
So
gonna go for
if
that.
you're for that.
I'm fine with that.
And if she's good with that.
And I don't know how much property is worth, if I'd have to charge you
Exactly.
something for
You
it, or
would
I don't know any,
have-
I'd have to find all that out.
You know what we've done with these? I've been involved with an easement before, and we're talking business here right now, I guess,
I
because I
suppose we
don't
should
know.
wait, yeah.
Well,
But
do that on
do we-
camera?
Do we need to table this?
Well,
Or do,
We need to get a decision.
Right, so we probably shouldn't. But that's just my suggestion, and I wanted everybody to hear it before I...
Yeah.
And at this point, then, you don't have any other issues or questions about the variance?
No.
Because if you're suggesting that you might want to do something similar to that, you would need that same type of a variance to have
Right.
access to lots that
Right,
might be.
eventually.
Yes, that's what
You know.
I'm saying, is that if,
Right. And I did mention it to you one day, but, yeah. That's how, yeah. I have no concerns at all.
thank you, Cindy.
Okay.
Lorelei, you have anything you want to add? I mean, you're kind of in that same situation. You already have an easement through to get to your property, so.
But it was sold with that understanding when
Yes.
I purchased it.
Right.
So that's why I didn't have to come here.
Yeah.
I'm here out of curiosity to see how the process works.
Aren't we all?
So Mike will be responsible for that road and anything it does, as in over by the police department,
It's a mess.
that ice
Yeah.
builds up every time.
Yeah. I
Just
mean,
like-
it's bad, and it smells bad, like a sewer.
So he will be responsible for that.
Well, I mean, it depends on what situation would be set up in terms of that easement and, you know, sale of that, if he sells that property, how that easement transfers to future owners and what, you know, how that responsibility gets carried on to the subsequent owners. I mean, I don't think Mike's gonna take care of that road if he sells the property, obviously, and it's gonna.
Actually, I have a sale pending on this whole process right here. The lower parcel, I have a offer accepted on it, and this is part of the process here. I didn't know I had to do this until
Yeah.
we started doing the paperwork. Well, I talked to Mike about it.
So that responsibility would likely transfer over to subsequent owner, whoever owns that easement across that property.
We have a maintenance agreement a maintenance and a construction agreement that's been developed as part of this, developing this access road, this driveway. And, you know, as part of the properties that exist, or the part of the properties that we're proposing.
And have you seen that, Mike?
No.
Basically, it says that the lower property owner is paying a certain percentage of the construction and maintenance and plowing, and the next one, another percentage of it. That's basically what it says.
Okay. Anybody else, as long as we still have the public hearing open, you know, opportunity to comment?
Are you hoping to go with a low income?
No, we're not. I mean, we're willing to. You know, right now, what we're doing is selling the property. That's it. I'm not doing any construction or any development other than selling the property.
Okay, at that, we're gonna close the public hearing portion of it and bring it back to the planning commission, you know, see if we can come to some decision here. Any thoughts or questions or comments, commissioners?
I thought that was a very generous, win-win, you know, offer by the neighbor. That's, sure, I'm not sure if that means that we can continue, but I thought that was a win-win for both of them. My one question is, as an R1 zone, I mean, these are permanent residential homes, not vacation rentals, or do they have the right to do? I think that's
Vacation rental is not allowed in the
Right.
R1 zone district.
right, because that's been a concern for lots of people. Make sure that this is not just going to be, you know, high traffic, so it's going to be a family's going to live there. I think that would probably satisfy some concerns.
I'm just wondering, so if the way this is presented now, 20-foot easement, and they do something different, how does that affect
Yeah.
what we agreed to today?
Well, we haven't agreed to anything. This is what the proposal has come in at. Now, it could be modified from that, and if there's some way to address that modification.
That's separate from this. We're just saying, yep, go ahead. If we
Well,
voted yes, it would
There
divide it.
still has to be an access to those rear lots, so we can't just go ahead and approve it. I mean, unless we approve it as it was presented, or if we think we want to approve it or want to move forward with it with an access on the other side of that line. I'm not quite sure how we deal with that, because it doesn't exist. There's not an easement, there's not language to create that easement. You know, it creates a little bit it creates a problem in terms of us taking action on that, so.
It might really complicate it it was a generous offer, and on the face of it, it seems like a good idea, but it completely defeats the purpose of this being an exemption from the platting rules if you're building a driveway that's going to be 15 feet wide and suddenly it's serving 6 lots instead of 3 or 2. And it's really just not going to be adequate anymore. So I think focusing on the request at hand is probably the right approach, And if there's a new idea, there needs to be a little more development of what that idea looks like before you have to worry about it or consider granting any approval for that. And we haven't really given anybody else any notice of what that might look like or.
So what you're saying is we could approve this, and they could still not do it and come back with a different plan? Is that what you're saying?
You could also approve it and say, we're okay with it being 20 feet or 10 and 10, and let the council, let them have a little time with it, and then it comes to the council meeting and they can decide. But it's opening up a little more complications in the future, and I think everybody should just know that. It's not necessarily going to be as easy for the next property owner, even if they've got this shared easement there. If we're talking about a shared private driveway that's serving 6 lots, suddenly emergency vehicle.
That's what my concern is, yes.
And a lot of other access issues. It's worth putting a little more thought into what that driveway looks like. Whereas if it's just this and the guy behind them, that's pretty common and probably not as concerned about it.
But is it a good idea to say a driveway here in this 20 feet, and then to know that the neighboring properties might want to do the same thing, and then they each have their own, and there causes stormwater issues?
Well,
That's
but look,
more.
there's one here, there's one here.
Yeah.
There's one here,
Right.
there's one here, there's one here, there's one here, there's one,
Right.
this is the exception rather than the rule when it comes to driveways accessing County Road 7, that there's not one on that 100 feet.
Yeah.
And you can't deny people access to their property.
No, it's not a question of that. If he wants to apply for a land use permit on the entirety of this piece of property, it's an administrative, and if he meets the requirements, we grant it to him. The issue here is not whether he gets to have a driveway on 7. He gets to have a driveway on 7. The issue is, and we don't even get to tell him where.
Right.
But the issue is, because he wants to split this property up, now we do get to talk about those issues a little bit more and make sure that it makes sense for us. And in the context of these questions that he was required to answer.
Can the board approve this with the contingency that we develop an agreement for an easement on the east side, or on the west side of your property?
Okay, I'm down,
That-
remember?
Yeah, that we create an easement on the west side of your property as a driveway to serve the proposed lots that I'm talking about. Then, if she wants to eventually develop the parcels on her side, then you have to look at it as no longer an access driveway, but, a development driveway or a development road or something like that. In other words, upgrade what we're talking about.
So an example of a recent development that it's acting a little more like that is Ravenwood. It's the west side of town on Highway 61. There's a road that goes down into the forest. These are oversized lots. These are smaller. Those don't have municipal sewer, so they're all 2-acre-ish lots. But there's a private road that serves 6 lots. And we were more interested then in what that road's construction looks like. How wide is that surface? What are the curves? How are you going to handle turnaround at the end of it? Issues like that, that if it's just a driveway, not so concerned about. And since we don't have a road standard to tell them what we want it to be, we can't even say, where does it cross the line from, that's just a driveway we don't care about, and now it's more like a street.
Right.
And, we don't allow dead ends without some kind of
Cool.
turnaround ability, because if we have to drive a big truck up there for emergency response, we don't want it to back down.
Could in fact Mike sell off that front parcel and retain a 20-foot easement along that east side property line to the rear parcel, since that rear parcel is accessed off of adjoins his home property and is accessed off of the public street of Senty Lane, or? I mean, is that even conceivable, if that would be a possibility?
Not sure what you're asking. I mean, are you talking about having it be 2 lots instead of 3?
Well, he's suggesting that he's going to be selling off this front parcel, but the remaining parcel, if it was just one parcel, would be attached to his existing home site.
I imagine he wants to sell the middle parcel too, and so skipping this process doesn't give him that ability. Technically, you could divide it and have that rear parcel connect to the Senty lot so that it's also approved private street access, and this one has public street access. You could do that, but you wouldn't give them the ability to do any sort of developing of those rear lots spaces without going through this process. So he could go through with the sale, but it wouldn't really give him any guarantees that the rest of his property is still usable.
So it doesn't seem like we can add a contingency to this.
I think you can,
We can.
yeah. As a matter of fact, I'd recommend the one which he's already talked about, which is that there's an agreement for the maintenance of this driveway. And that's not difficult, that's pretty standard.
It's already done.
Yeah.
That's already done.
That's pretty common too.
Okay.
Here's another possibility. Can you approve this the way it is, with the easement as it is, just as drawn? Maybe with a note that Senty and Cindy are talking about changing the easement to her property, and that is actually your preference.
I'm not positive if we can do that, and I think that comes back into the other concern you're bringing in, is that, this win-win situation, though, then it goes from a driveway to a road for 6 different places. I mean, I'm not sure, can we do that? I mean, I appreciate wanting to make sure a road that's has integrity and use and meets everybody's, concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that I don't think that should be some assurance to Cindy that would be adequate for the development of your back of your parcel. I mean, it might be, but again, I think without having any information, because if you look at the way Humphrey Circle, the lots are laid out, they're kind of, they're laying crosswise to Fifth Street, and if that was Cindy's property was developed in that fashion, there could be maybe more than 3 lots created. I mean, what do you have on Humphrey Circle? 5 or 6 lots.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
So
You
I mean, it
could certainly
be-
do that and meet our dimensional requirements if you have access to the municipal sewer.
And so in a way, we're talking possibly a road that's going to possibly serve 9 places, in a sense that.
Well, all those possibilities exist.
Right.
I think Tim's point is we can't give anybody assurances that those possibilities are going to happen. So if they're going to make a deal where she's giving up something and getting something in return, it might not be what she thinks it is. And it might not be of any use to her, because we may have to find a different solution to access that property.
So how would we determine that? I mean, maybe it's not even our responsibility, but.
Without getting a drawing from Cindy about what she wants to do, it's really hard to speculate.
Got it.
And I think the same discussion would end up happening at the city council meeting, that we're having here, is that Mike has proposed one option in terms of a driveway easement. Cindy has offered the possibility of another. Now, I don't know if you can work out any kind of an arrangement. I mean, our city council meeting is next week. It would seem pretty unlikely that you're going to work through all those details and get something to Mike by Friday to get that on the council agenda and get that information to the council. But, the council would have the opportunity to kind of have the same conversation that we're having. We could make whatever recommendation we choose to make. The council makes the ultimate decision, so.
You mentioned the potential for sale of the property. I actually have, I have a purchase agreement on the lower parcel. And so this whole process is part of the contingencies of it all. I'm feeling a bit of urgency to get something resolved at this meeting and at the city council meeting, but then have the option to be able to make some changes to the road location, as I talk with Cindy.
Well, and understand that all we make is a recommendation to the city council, and the city council makes that final decision. So whatever we do today is going to get referred on to the council, and they will act on that.
So if we approve this, they work out their deal and they decide they want a road on her property, we don't have anything to do with that, correct? Because she can put a road on her property.
You've granted a variance to Mike to subdivide this in a way that you normally wouldn't be able to, contingent on
The road being
a
there.
concept that you've looked at and reviewed. You don't have to hold him to this. If you want to grant him some contingency to put it partially on the property to the east, I don't think that's very complicated to write up. You could make that recommendation to the council that you'd recommend approving this, but you'd also recommend, if he makes a deal with the neighbor, that driveway could exist, partially or entirely on the property to the east. And we could write that into the resolution. That wouldn't be that difficult. That gives them some flexibility to take a little more time to work this out. And if you're talking about selling that first lot, what you're not talking about is building that driveway right away. It wouldn't necessarily have to be figured out until you talk about selling the middle lot.
We'll use that as the driveway for the first lot also. Wherever this access driveway goes, that will also serve the first lot. But I think there's time, if, for what you're talking about, the way of the wording that you're suggesting, I think that would work with what I have going on.
So, anybody willing to make a motion, or?
I think I am. If you state it with all those conditions again, how do you word that? They're.
Why don't you start?
I think I got it.
You got to go ahead.
I would make the motion to approve the Senty plan as it's been presented to us. I'd also approve a plan which would allow this driveway to be built onto the neighboring land to the east per the agreements between Ms. Larson and Mr. Senty. And I'd be happy to recommend that as well.
Is that preferred alignment, or is that just an alternate alignment?
I don't know that there's any meaningful difference in the way that you're going to write this, because once you've written this and it's done, our part in it is over, and whether we prefer it or not is meaningless.
I think the only thing that would add would be that the planning commission has recommended that as a preferred alignment, and the council can take that as they choose, but not that one is equal to the other, that there might be a higher standing for
I can
one.
use the adjective preferred.
And that's the maintenance agreement for the road.
With a contingency too that the maintenance would be,
That there's a maintenance agreement. Just say there's a maintenance
and
agreement.
there's a maintenance agreement.
Yeah.
Great, got it.
Okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second?
One second.
Motion and a second. Just to clarify the motion is to approve the variance request as presented with the easement along the east 20 feet of the Senty property, but also acknowledging that there's a preferred easement on Cindy Larson's side, the 20 foot of the west side of Cindy Larson's property. That would be, yeah, whatever, however you work that out, but that would be the preferred location of that easement, and also that there be a driveway maintenance agreement included.
I have to go to work at the Y at 5.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you.
You know how to get a hold of me at
Yeah, I'll
work.
talk to you.
Okay.
Is that the motion?
I
Okay.
think that's the motion.
Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor vote aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. So this will go to the council next Wednesday. You're welcome to come to that. It's not a public hearing per se, but at least you can hear the conversation that takes place at that time.
Yeah.
It-
Be
meetings
live
are all-
streamed too if you want to
they're all
watch it
li- They're all
online.
live, yes, so, yeah. Well, I mean, I appreciate it. I know it's not the easiest thing for people to come to these meetings. It's, you know, I think it's an intimidating forum. It's not, you know. Yeah, Ray, you're on this side of the table now, see?
Yeah.
But so we do appreciate, you know, you taking the time to come and, you know, voice your concerns, so hopefully we've helped mitigate some of those. Thank you. Thank you. The findings, you know, with that motion, I think we can take those findings that were included in the application. I mean, I think those were pretty substantive and, you know, appropriate for,
I'm going to paraphrase too.
you can, yeah, cut them down, so.
Housing update.
Housing update, yeah.
Two pieces of information. One, tomorrow I will be sending you some draft maps. And so this is the first bit of information we've received back from our consultants. They've been working to gather the data and start putting maps together with it for a couple of weeks now. Thanks a bunch to Cook County, and particularly Kyle, for all the help that he's provided them in getting the data. Our job will be to look these draft maps over and make some judgments about them. Do they make sense? Is it accurate? Are they usable? Are they answering the questions we want them to use or to answer for us? The timeline for that is comments by the end of next week.
Okay.
And then we'll turn around and provide that feedback to the consultants again. We're looking to schedule a meeting on Wednesday, June 19th. So if you can check your schedules for whether that's an available night. It's a Wednesday, but it's the third Wednesday, which is not a regular meeting day. So I'm hoping that because you've got a regular Wednesday meeting, you don't have some other regular Wednesday gig on third Wednesdays, but it's a shot in the dark. Let me know as soon as possible if that's not going to work. We'll invite a few additional players to that meeting, city council, EDA members, maybe a couple of others that have helped us on other things, but we're not trying to broadcast that broadly. It'll be open to the public, of course. Anybody who wants to come can, but our strategy will be we'll record it, and then we will try to make that information broadly available for people so that at any time they want, they can come back and look and see. We'll also have the maps then that'll be available for people to look and see. And that'll be the kind of the first phase of our project done.
Okay.
We'll have our maps, we'll have our meeting to look it over, and then they'll move on and start the ordinance review and start generating a list of things for us to work on. That is the update.
Thank you. Okay. New business, trailer parking.
Right, now to the fun stuff. So the council had a great conversation about this. It's been a few months in the works. I covered it in the memo, so I assume that that's all stuff now that you've had a chance to look at. If you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, we can start looking at pictures.
I'd like to see some photos.
All right.
Pictures are 1,000 words, yeah.
Here's what the council looked at. And so just the understanding, the ordinance language is in your packet. When we say trailers, we actually mean trailers, campers, and motorhomes. It's anything that's used as sleeping quarters for any person or conduct of any business or used for a selling or advertising device. So we say trailer, but mostly we mean camper, but it's also commercial trailer. Here's what it's not. Boat trailer. So if somebody's got a big old boat on a trailer, this ordinance is not addressing that. Some sort of utility trailer that's just for general purpose use, flatbed trailer, dumpster trailer, whatever. If it's your own personal trailer, you're not conducting business with it, it's not, this ordinance doesn't cover it. What does this ordinance say about where trailers can go? You can have one unoccupied trailer, and it has to be in an accessory private garage building or in a rear yard in any district. So we're going to talk about the problems with that language by looking at these three pictures. On the left, can everybody see this okay? You have a fifth wheel camper. It's clearly a trailer as defined in our ordinance. It's set back nicely from the road. It's on a paved driveway. It's not blocking anybody's views. It's very tastefully displayed. It's in the side yard, not the rear yard.
Not the rear.
So is this what we meant? This is not what we want? Because this seems to be causing no problems, and it seems to be responsibly stored. But technically, this isn't the rear yard. Now, we don't define rear yard in the city code section that talks about trailers. So we're relying on the zoning ordinance definitions to say that's a side yard, not a rear yard. More on that later.
And we don't even know the origins of that language in the city code, whether
No.
that predated zoning regulations or if it's just a nomenclature of saying side yard to rear yard to front yard, which just had been a general concept maybe when that language was put in place, because we don't know when that origin of that language was.
So what we're going to try and discover tonight is, what do we want it to mean? And can we write some simple ordinance language that clarifies our intent here and meets our intent rather than just is a slave to those words that don't hold any meaning necessarily for us anymore. We've got this middle situation. Once again, well, you've got a number of vehicles there. As long as those are all licensed and operable, we don't have an ordinance that says anything about those vehicles parking where they're parking. Except for that camper, which even though it's a vehicle like the rest of them, it is a trailer as defined in this ordinance. And it is absolutely in the front yard. There's no gray areas about it. So our ordinance wouldn't allow this. And I think most people would agree this is one of the situations that the ordinance is trying to prevent. Having something like this parked right close to the street or on the street, but in the front yards where people's view sheds often exist and where we're trying to create a different feel than a rear yard where it's more appropriate for storage. On the right-hand side now, we've got a trailer, and this is one that's for conducting business most likely, but it may be also something for camping in. I'm not entirely sure, but it's probably a trailer that's controlled by this ordinance. And it looks quite a bit more open and visible than the one on the left, but in this case, it's actually in the rear yard. So this one's okay. And it's hard to figure out why that's okay, but that one on the left isn't okay. That's our struggle. So let's take a look at the next slide just to get some definitions figured out. Let's look at the other one first. Here's the trailer on the left. This guy right here is the picture that we were looking at. So our ordinance says the front yard is from the front line of the structure to the front line of the lot, this area. That's probably about 25 feet, since 25 feet is our required setback, and it often is where these buildings are located.
25 feet.
But sometimes the building's back here, and then the front yard is still from the building line to the property line. This red box is no-go. This orange box here is the side yard, and again, it's where the building exists and out to the side lot line. So there's a lot of side yard in this lot. And then this green area back here is a rear yard. If somehow this fifth wheel got inside of this building, we'd say they can park one of those inside that building. If they can't fit it in there, they could park it back here and it would be legal. But you can see how that is going to be difficult to do. And a lot of folks that are not complying with the ordinance, that's why they're not complying, because it's really difficult to find where this thing's supposed to go on their property. When it exists here in the side yard, it's not in the way of anybody else's view shed in a different way than the building already is. So my suspicion is that although they said rear yard in the language in the ordinance, what they really meant was not front yard. Let's test that a little bit further. Here, I'll do it. Oh, I got you. This is a corner lot. And this is even more problems because in corner lots in our zoning ordinance, they don't have a rear yard. They've got two fronts and two sides. So that doesn't make any sense. And here we've got this same problem. This is the building line right here. So this area is definitely front yard. This area is inside of that 25-foot setback, but you can see there's also this black box here, which is behind the 25-foot setback, but in front of the building line. So this is technically front yard and probably a no-go, but up for discussion as to whether we meant, is it just this 25 feet that we care about, or does it depend on how far back the building is set? And you think about some houses in the city, they're set back quite a ways on their lot. And so they've got this massive area that we define as front yard, and now they can't use any of that for this sort of thing.
Unless they build a garage,
Unless they build a garage.
put something inside of it.
And then this area, which most people would probably consider the rear yard here, is actually all side yard because corner lots have two fronts and two sides, which is really the problem we're having here. So, where do these things belong?
Well, from just a corner lot perspective, you don't have a rear yard,
Right.
you know, so I mean that,
Yeah, my belief is that it has nothing to do with our definitions of front yard, rear yard, side yard. It has to do with the location of the structures on the property. And my thought is that it would be more appropriate to see these trailers stored either to the rear or to the side of existing homes. I mean, if you didn't have a home on a property, maybe I suppose that would be an issue. But could you still store a trailer on a
Well, I
property?
happen to know that is, we have that happening in our city limits.
Well,
So what does that mean?
What?
We do have a trailer stored on property without a home.
So I think the question
Where is
might-
the backyard?
question for
Do we?
Mike is.
I'm
that-
not giving you names.
Question is for Mike though is that Mike's asking though is what do we want to see? What do we think is a reasonable?
That's
Because
where I would
we've
love
had
to
multiple
start.
years of non-enforcement and people that have had trailers that now have gotten letters that have said you're in violation of our ordinance. Well, our ordinance doesn't make a lot of sense. I think we're all in agreement to that.
your simple solution would work if you just added the two rear or side yards.
Let me back up a step to the council's discussion again
Okay.
and just clarify what the role tonight that I'm hoping that you can accomplish for us is. The council recognized the complexity of this and that the real question isn't what do we want the rules to say, but what do we want them to accomplish? Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Like,
Good.
Why do we care?
What's
Why
the
do we
spirit?
care? Do we care? And
I
maybe
don't
we don't.
care.
The council has already said that code enforcement is something they want to work on this year, and that we're going to be kicking off pretty quickly here to ask people in the community that kind of question and help figure out what are the code issues where enforcement's been lacking that are creating problems. What are those problems? And so that we can design the code that's addressing those problems rather than look for the problems and then write the code. That means that it's going to be a while before we know in the end what we want our ordinance to say. In the meantime, the question is, is there some that we're sure we don't want, and that we're sure that whatever process happens with the public, we're willing to enforce today? And we can change the ordinance to clarify that. So for instance, if, Tim's suggestion is, we definitely don't want to see any in front of the building line ever, then we'll change that language quickly. We'll go through this process with the public, and if we discover something a little bit different, we can come back and change it again. In the meantime, we're holding off on enforcing anything until either we've got this kind of interim language change or until we're done with the whole question.
I think that's a fair first step, to not have anything within the front, line.
25 feet line or front yard? Because I drove around and looked and thought, oh, you know what? In that property, you're legal. Over here, you're not. Is that really fair? I don't have a problem. I have more of a problem. I hate picking on the trailers. I saw boat trailers. I saw utility trailers. I saw lots of different things that I thought, really, we're going to pick on somebody who has a camper, but we're not going to pick on them?
Yeah.
And so
We didn't choose this fight. The fight was already
and it was handed to us.
created
And I was-
long ago, so
Right.
all we're doing is trying to figure out
But I
what's...
think the spirit is about, these are, if I understand it correctly, why these particular trailers? Because people could be living in them, or renting them, or staying in them, or...
I actually think it's more about the not residential character of them in terms of either their size or their use. But again, this is the question we really need to be spending our time exploring, is what about them is causing a problem, and what is that the character of that problem, and then we can figure out how to address it.
And that's why I'm thinking, our community, I know I did a lot of research on what are other communities doing, and people have a real problem with these. And I'm thinking, but wait, aren't we different? I know lots of people have campers or trailers because we're a camping community. We use them. We have boats and trailers and campers. And is there a No, I have a problem with them being parked on the street all summer long. I have a problem with that one. But it's a little bit in front of your house, or if it's off to the side of your house, I don't have a problem with that. And we have a boat, you have a camper, and you have a boat, and you have your work truck. Yeah, I kind of don't like that, but
Let's take a
Let's
quick
not pick
poll. And this is the one I'd want to use. You can see there's a building here as well, and this is not the house, but it's an accessory structure.
I can't...
It's hard to discern, but this right here
Oh, I see it now.
Okay.
Thank you.
is also a structure.
Got it.
There's one here as well, right? So this is set back 25 feet from the property line, and so is this. It creates this standard area where we're not wanting to see these. Now, look at this one. That's not anywhere near 25 feet from the property line. So are we saying they can park a camper right here? There's something about that 25-foot standard area that creates fairness, particularly when we don't know for sure what the issue is we're trying to address. At least having a fairness standard about it, I think, makes sense to me. So you could pick the building line, or you can pick the setback line, or you can pick we don't want to do any of it. And so if you had those three, where would you be?
right now, nowhere.
You wouldn't
No
want to
line,
do any
no
of it.
line.
Somewhere in between, I think.
Couldn't you have something like building line or 25 feet, whichever one is farther away from the road?
Well, it's got to be.
I mean, looking at the neighbor one, so like if you had some kind of language that said trailers have to be parked behind the front line of the home, or
But then they
or
need to
25 foot, whichever one is farther.
Well,
back.
and I think it gets at what are we really trying to accomplish? What's the purpose of having this regulation at all? And
The only clue I've got, based on the complaints that we have received about these, is it's about views. more than anything.
Okay.
Because of the size of them, they're often in a place that you'd expect to have a view shed, and instead you end up not having one.
And you can see that from the right-hand property, looks down to the next lot that has a trailer in it, in the front yard, actually onto the right-of-way.
If there's other issues, it's about neatness. That's the other issue. But then again, it's not about campers, right? They just might be a part of the question, but this ordinance isn't the one we're going to need to use to solve that problem. We're going to have
Right,
to
you could
decide.
remove that camper and you would still have a neatness issue perhaps.
Yeah, and I don't know whether we're ready to talk about that in an ordinance, but we're
Right.
going to figure that out as a community.
Well, even at the council meeting, you know, we said, well, if you look at those three photos, it's pretty easy to look at the middle photo and say, yeah, we don't want to encourage this. Would like to be able to make sure that this kind of thing doesn't happen. The other two, not so, you know,
Problematic.
well, that's it. I mean, but I think we know what we don't like to see, but how to characterize that in a way that we can put it into an ordinance that is clear for property owners, for city administrators and officials to enforce.
People want a line. Where's that line?
You can't, yeah.
So I have a real life situation at my home where my son came home with his pickup camper on the back of his pickup, and stayed with me for a few weeks before he moved on to his next location and parked his truck in my driveway.
Yeah.
That's illegal under this zoning ordinance.
Yes.
Well, really? I have a problem with that. Now, maybe, you're down below me, so it didn't create a problem with your view
I couldn't
shed.
see the northern lights.
But, yeah, there's another part. I think, really? Why? He wasn't living in it. It was a vehicle he was driving around here, but he had to go and find a place to store his camper for those 2 weeks while he was here. Moving on.
Well, I mean, I
Does
think
that make sense?
that gets to the purpose of why are we
Why are we doing
why are
this?
we trying to regulate? And I think when you look at those three photos, it's kind of easy to say that middle photo is something that we would want to be able to address through some kind of an ordinance.
But if there was another truck there, if it wasn't a camper, that wouldn't change that problem.
If they're all operable and licensed.
If it was a truck, I mean a boat there instead of that camper, this ordinance wouldn't do anything.
So again, the question is, what are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to regulate trailers, or are we trying to regulate some kind of activity?
I think we should ask the city council, what is it that they want us to, do they want us to focus on trailers, or do they want to focus on that problem?
They want you to focus on trailers, and I think you can say what we're interested in enforcing right now is nothing until the bigger question has been answered and you have done what they asked you to do. Or you can say, I think that it's reasonable to set the line here and enforce those and not do the stuff behind that line until we've had the bigger question answered. And then that is fulfilling what they've asked you to do. So I go back to the three options: the building line, the setback line, or we're not going to enforce this at all until the bigger question is answered and see where are people at.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
I mean, I think we're given the charge because trailers are what's addressed in the ordinance. And that's the question is, we have this ordinance that says this is the rule, and all of these seem to violate that. We've sent out letters, the council said, well, let's not follow up that letter with anything more until we decide how we really want to enforce this, recognizing that we haven't done this for forever. I mean,
I'm just curious about one thing, the overnight parking element of this.
Mm-hmm.
So no person shall park any trailer on any public street, alley, or place continuously from 12:30 till 4:30 unless such place has been set aside for such purpose or such use has been authorized by the city.
Yeah, and place is being modified by public in that statement.
Say that again?
That when they say place, they mean public place, public street,
Street.
public alley, or public place.
Got it. Because I think of like, fisherman's picnic, and you'll start getting campers, and they'll line up here, and I've seen people stay overnight, and
Which is not legal.
Got it.
Yeah, and the council talks about a lot of sort of special locations of things for a fisherman's picnic event, where we might say, yes, you can have your vendors park their commercial trailers in this parking lot overnight for the event, set it aside for that purpose, and not go and enforce that. So then it is set aside for that purpose, like this ordinance says, at least for those 4 days, but not for campers. So pretty common that it's a camper that's going to be creating that problem for us.
I think the ordinance needs to be looked at in more totality of not just campers.
And I would agree to that, because I think that it doesn't necessarily address the concerns. There are other types of things that are sitting in front yard that, I would think would be just as objectionable, or maybe even more objectionable than a trailer that, raise the same question. They're not subject to the ordinance right now based on this language. So I think it's a little bit more comprehensive look at what it is that we classify as the problem and what it is that we want to do to solve that. And, at this point, we haven't enforced anything for, forever. And so I don't see the urgency to jump all over this, other than that we've already sent out the first round of letters, and we have kind of some responsibility to not let that die. And, people think that, well, yeah, they sent out a letter, now they're just going to go away. I think we need to figure out what our response is, but it should be a thoughtful response. And maybe that's the report back to the council, is that, this is going to be a more time necessary conversation than to just make one kind of judgment and think we're going to solve what I'm not even sure what we all perceive as the problem.
I don't know that we share that idea.
We didn't talk about that. So.
No, we just talked about the need to, and I suspect, based on the council's conversation, that they'll be just fine with that. That we talked about an intermediary step to address some of the more egregious examples as a possibility, and not something that we have to do. And so, if your position is we're not really comfortable doing that, we don't want to do any enforcement until we've figured this out in a comprehensive way.
Does that mean that, according to what I'm looking at the memo, there are 10 trailers clearly in violation, 7 of which were previously documented, so this would be their second time?
Yeah.
So are they going to be then getting petty misdemeanors, or not?
I won't be following up with them at all if you don't tell me there's a part of this ordinance that you want to clarify so that they're definitely in violation, and I will follow up on that.
Got it.
And what the council's comment was, they wanted to refer this back to the planning commission without any further action on those letters until the issue was more resolved. And I think our response back is that that's going to take some time.
That's probably fair,
Some of these trailers I know have been there for 10 years, longer. Maybe not the same trailers, but versions of them. So it's. I don't think that there's a life safety or health issue that is necessary for us to jump all over this. But I think that there's a responsibility, just in the sense that we have an ordinance, and if it's not working, then we should figure out what that ordinance
So if
needs to be.
So if a neighbor did pull a trailer in, and, I mean, if we choose to do nothing, but someone pulls a trailer in their yard and starts renting it out, I mean, that's illegal, isn't it?
And I don't think that the occupancy part
That's what I'm looking at.
is part of this discussion at all. So, nor is the on-street parking.
I'm just trying to
Both of those
anticipate what
things-
people's concerns are. I mean, we've got views, I can't see the lake, but you also have the sense of like, look, you've got these people constantly coming, they're renting this little trailer in your yard.
Yeah.
They're noisy, they're leaving garbage. I mean, I would see that could be disruptive to neighborhoods and neighbors, you know, so as long, I mean, that's still illegal, so that's not what
Yes.
we're talking about.
And you have the discretion to say, we're not going to enforce this piece of it, and change your mind and enforce it. You know, just because we haven't chose the enforcement in the past doesn't mean that the code doesn't exist anymore or that it's no longer valid. It's still valid. It's still the rule. We're just not going to move very fast on some of these. I would say if there's someone occupying a trailer, we'd still enforce that. And if there's some parked on the street for any length of time, we're going to still enforce that.
How does that happen? Does a neighbor
How does
just call?
enforcement happen?
Yeah, does a neighbor just say, hey, or does someone call and say, hey, someone I think is renting out a trailer in their yard?
Yes,
then
and
the
generally,
sheriff,
we
or-
say call the sheriff, yes.
Okay,
The sheriff is contracted to do enforcement of local ordinances for us.
okay.
So,
And has that been a good history? Does that happen?
it's been terrible, and, you know, that's not a reflection on the sheriff's office. It's a response that people don't like. For some reason, people don't think that it's a problem to call City Hall and report an issue, but they feel much less comfortable calling the sheriff because maybe it's elevated it to a status that they feel it's not warranted. But unfortunately, that is our code enforcement
Got it.
strategy right now. You know, particularly for those sorts of things, is to work through law enforcement, and we don't do it very often.
So, are we in general agreement that we're basically going to suggest to the council that, you know, this needs more in-depth look and, you know,
I think we are.
Yeah.
I think if people have specific concerns about violations, there is the process of calling the sheriff. Yeah, I don't think
we need to make a motion to do that. I think we just, make that report back to the council and,
So when does this get looked at? Because I really think, why have it on the books? And
Well,
I'm not
it-
saying there isn't an issue. I just don't think
No.
enforcing this part of it is going to solve it.
But it's
No.
probably
And I would
the
like to
season
talk
now.
about that.
Yeah, this is one, it'll be coming up soon, and it'll be a multi-month conversation to try and figure out what are the
Does it
issues we want to
happen here
tackle.
or at city council?
Well, it'll be both.
I suppose we can use the summer for further research. We'll probably have more case studies that we could look at and.
Well, the biggest push is that we want to involve the community in this conversation more. Because having a group of 5 or 6 people here or at the city council meeting try and figure out what the problem is isn't going to get us there.
Great.
We need the community to
Smart.
weigh in.
I think that's a good idea.
Well, and I think too is that, like I say, at this point, the council hasn't even, collectively made a statement as to what the perception of
spirit.
what the problem is, other than that the ordinance isn't being enforced and that there's units out there that seem to be in violation. I think the council is kind of looking for some guidance or advice from us, and I think this will be helpful. Means that we've got another project.
Oh, that's fun.
All right, anything else? We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Yes. Thanks, Lorelei. Stuck it out through the whole thing, yeah.